Alright, welcome back everyone to Digital Dreambox. Today we're going to create a spiral staircase with a central column. Let's see what that looks like. So I grabbed some images of different spiral staircases, and all of these have a central pole or column that helps support the steps and the overall structure. I really like the design of all these, especially the ones with the glass steps. So this one over here, as well as this one. And I like this connecting piece that connects these steps together as well. Over here, I like the trim around the outside, and overall they're all really nice. And what we'll do is we'll probably blend some of those styles and create our own. So yeah, let me put these images away and we can get started. Alright, let's begin. Go up to your poly modeling shelf and add a cylinder into the scene. We're going to use this to make our column. Let's hold down the right mouse button and choose vertex selection, and we're going to grab the vertices at the top and move them up so it looks a little more like a pole or column. Right there is fine. We'll be able to adjust it more later once we have our steps. Go into object mode, and what we'll do is we'll select our column, open up the channel box, and go down here and we'll add it to a new layer. Double click the layer and let's rename this. I'm going to call mine the reference layer. There we go, and then just click save. And what I'll do is I'll toggle this last box. Once I get a T, it stands for template. It means I can see it, but I can't select it. All right, so now let's quickly create our step. So add a polygon disk to your scene, and I'm going to open up the attribute editor. We can change the divisions over here, but what I would like to do is maybe go into the top view first. So to do that, let's open our 2-panel view. And then in this left panel, I want to change it to top. So you can do that by going to Panels, Orthographic, and choosing top. Or you can also use Maya's hotbox control. So to access Maya's hotbox, hold down the spacebar and then hover over Maya. We're going to hold down one of the mouse buttons and I'm going to choose top. There we go. And then if you want, you can tap the spacebar to expand this view. And over here, what we'll do is we'll select our disk, and then I want to scale it up so it's a little bit bigger than the column because the back of the step hugs around that column. So I'll go with maybe something like that is fine. All right, so now let's adjust these divisions. So over here, I'm going to, actually I'll make this a little bit smaller now that I think about it. There we go. And then over here, we can increase the sides from here. What I want are no divisions, so I'll drag this down to 0. And for the sides, I'm going to make mine about 20 just to make it the roundness I want. If you're planning to, say, model and subdivide it, you may want less divisions. But I'm going to go with 20. There we go. And then what we'll do is we'll open up the channel box, and I'm going to turn off the visibility of the reference layer now. There we go. And now let's go into vertex selection. We can see all the vertices. I would like to connect some of these again so we have quads. So to do that, I'm going to box select these vertices over here. And then I'm going to hold down Shift and the right mouse button and choose Connect Components. And then we can box select these ones and press G to repeat. And just make your way down the mesh and connect all of these. And there we go, I have them all now. All right, so now I want to box select these vertices on one side of the mesh and just move them out. And then what I'll do is I'll basically create the rough form of this step. So I'll scale these apart and just move these out over here a little bit, and that should be good for now. We could scale it a little bit here, but just get the rough form. We'll be able to adjust it more later. Let's go back to our perspective view. And in this view, what I would like to do is extrude the mesh. So let's go into object mode, and you can get to the extrude operation from your modeling toolkit if you like over here. You also have some other tools such as multicut, bevel, but I'm going to use the marking menu. So I'm going to hold down Shift and the right mouse button, which opens the Polygon Tools marking menu. And depending on which component mode you're in, you may have different options as well, but I'm going to choose extrude. And then I'll bring it up to about right here to give it a bit of thickness. All right. And now while these faces are still selected, what I would like to do is grab the perimeter edges so that I can bevel them a little bit, because my step is going to be made of like a tempered glass material and I want to reduce that sharpness. So to give it a bit of a bevel will make it seem like, you won't cut yourself on that step. Right, so now while I have the faces selected, I'm gonna hold down Control and the right mouse button, and I'm gonna go to 2 edges and 2 edge perimeter. And now I have that, awesome. And then what we can do is we can also select the bottom edges, or at least try to select them by holding down the right mouse button, and we're gonna choose Select Similar. And what Maya will do is it'll try and select those similar components. I'll press 4 on the keyboard, right, just to have a better look, and I can see that it's actually grabbed them. That's awesome. So what I'll do now is I'll press 5 to go back to the regular shaded display, and now what we'll do is we'll bevel these. I'm using that marquee menu, by the way. I'm gonna choose bevel, and I just want to play with this fraction a little bit. I'll probably reduce it to about right there. So maybe a bit higher. There we go. And now let's go into object mode. We'll select our mesh, we'll open up the channel box, and we can see that we have some transforms here that we changed and some history. Let's just freeze those and delete that history. All right, let's open up the outliner and rename it as well. We'll call it the disk step, and the cylinder we'll call maybe either pole or column. All right, and now what we'll do is we'll basically create our other steps using Maya's Mesh feature. So before we do that, actually, I'm going to select the step, and I'm going to turn on the grid for a second. If I go into my move tool, you can see that my pivot point is right here at the center, right? So it's going to rotate from this point. That's pretty important for this object, so I just want to mention that before we get into Mesh. So Mesh is Maya's procedural generation toolset, which has some visual effects and motion graphics features as well. For us though, it's great at repeating elements. It's great at creating repeating elements, which is our staircase. So let's select our step, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go up to the Mesh shelf, and this first icon will create a Mesh network for it. Click on that. And then before we do anything else, let's create a Mesh editor as well. So that's this icon over here. And with the Mesh editor, we can select our nodes from here. We can create new nodes, and we can enable or disable them. I'm gonna take my Mesh editor and pin it to the bottom of the outliner. So I'll hover over here till I get a short blue line and let go. And then I want to give the outliner a bit more space. So I'll hover over here and I'll get a double arrow. Now there's actually 2 of them. There's one that will split your outliner, and there's one right below it that we can click and drag and move down. It took me way too long to figure that out, by the way, but now we have a bit more space. All right, let's rename our Mesh network as well. So we can double click it from here or here, and I'm just gonna call it steps. All right, Mesh1 _ steps for me. And now let's see what this has done. So with our Mesh editor, we can quickly select the steps distribute. So click on that, and you should be able to get this. Sometimes you have to click it twice, because if you're on another object or if the attribute editor is closed, sometimes it goes to the Mesh network first. All right, let's give this a bit of distance in the Y so we can see what has happened. So if we increase that Y distance, you can see that we actually have 10 steps. So each of these points represents kind of like an instance of our regular object. And our regular object is actually still there. It's actually hidden. So you can see it's grayed out. So for us though, we can play with the number of points by increasing or decreasing that. We can also decrease this X distance, which it gives us by default, right? If I drag that down, we can align that better. And then what we can do also is play with the Y rotation. So if we increase this, you can see right away, we pretty much have our spiral staircase. And depending on how high your staircase is, right, you can play with the number of steps and play with the rotation. You can also crank up the rotation if you want. So for example, I can type in maybe 540, and I've created a larger rotation, and we can play with the distance and give it more steps and create a longer spiral if we want, right? For me, I'm gonna actually make it 360. That's fine. You can create yours whatever you like. It won't affect this tutorial, but I'm going to decrease the number of points to like 16. 16 to 20 is a good number for like a 360 rotation. I'm gonna go with 16, and then for the distance, I'm gonna make mine 40. There we go. And now that looks pretty good, but my step feels a little bit short, right? So I'm actually gonna close this up, and now I wanna show you how you can change your step. So Our step is hidden. Let's select it and press H on the keyboard to unhide it. And then I want to move it out here a little bit. All right, so with the steps selected, what I can do is I can adjust the scale if I want. Right, I'll bring it down a little bit to here for now. I can also rotate it if I want as well. And we can go into one of the component modes and we can change it. So I can box select these ones and make the step longer if I like. I'll bring back the grid, and I'm actually going to make the step about the distance of the grid for me. All right, and yeah, so you can actually go in and continue modeling if you like for it. But it has some limitations. For example, I wasn't able to soften or harden the edges and have it affect the instances. So you'll have to watch out for that. But what I would like to do is I would like to have it so that these steps overlap. So I want to scale it in this direction, right? And I want to get into here and view it, right? I could try and find an angle to make that happen or move my step. But a tip for you is that once you select one of these handles, for example, this one, you can actually hold down the middle mouse button, click and drag, and you can adjust from here. So I can actually go into here, find an angle where I see both steps, right? And then hold down the middle mouse button and adjust it so I can have a bit of overlap. There we go. Just for sometimes when your transform tool is out of view. And I think I'll go with maybe something like that. Should be fine. Maybe a bit less. Yeah, maybe a bit more actually. There we go. And now what we'll do is we'll adjust the thickness as well. So I'm going to go into object mode, maybe play with this thickness, and I'll go with maybe something like that for me. All right. And now what I want to do is actually go into the top view as well. So let's tap the spacebar, hover over this panel. And what I would like to do is just go into object mode, move this over here. And I'd like to make sure that that distance around the outside is feeling round. So I'll go into vertex selection, grab these vertices, and we want to scale it basically in this direction. So if I bring it out here, it has this flowery pattern. I don't really want it, so I'm going to bring this in and maybe zoom out so I can see it better. And I'll bring it out to probably maybe right here for me. All right, so now let's go back to our perspective view and we have our step. Awesome. So what I want to do next is maybe open up the channel box and put the step onto this layer. So to do that, select your repro mesh. We're going to hold down the right mouse button over here and add selected objects. And then toggle the visibility back on. And let's make it so that it's an R. R stands for reference, so we can see it, but we can't select it. All right. And then actually, let's make it a regular layer for now and adjust our column while we're at it. So select your column, go into vertex selection, and I'm going to move these vertices up top to about right here. And I want to give this a bit of a cap. So I'm going to go up here, go grab my multi-cut tool, right, which you can get from your modeling toolkit if you like. And I want to put a cut right about here and then go into face mode. Grab these faces over here. And it looks like I grabbed them all good. And then I want to extrude that. So by the way, sometimes you'll see me do that. I'll press 4 on the keyboard. I may have mentioned this already, but that allows me to see the wireframe. And I'll press 5 to go back. All right, let's extrude that. And I'll give it a bit of thickness. So something like that is fine. And then at the bottom, I want to do the same thing. So I'll go over here. Let's go into object mode for a second. Select it. I'll just frame in on it so I can zoom in it easier. And now what I'll do is I'll grab the multi-cut tool, grab a cut right here, or sorry, insert a loop right there to add our cut. And then I'll grab these faces. Another way to grab that loop of faces is to select one face, hold down Shift, double click this one, and that should grab all of them for you. All right, and now I want to extrude that out and give it a bit of thickness. So I'll bring it out to probably right here is fine for now. I kind of want to go to the side view for a second. So let's go hover over this panel. Again, you can use the, you can get to it from up here, panels, orthographic, or use the hotbox. So hold down the spacebar, left mouse button, and I want to do right view. All right, and then in this view, I just want to go into vertex selection for a second, and I want to move this down and give it a bit more distance. So the bottom of this I want to match this. So for example, the top of this step to the, basically the top of this step is called the rise. So I just want to match that for the bottom to the top, or make it a little bit less to make that first step a little bit comfortable to step on. Right. And then over here, I want to actually add another cut. So I'm going to go into my multi-cut tool and add another cut right about here. And then I'll go into face mode, grab these faces and extrude that out as well. So extrude, give it a bit of thickness, something like that. And let's take a look. All right, that looks good for me. And now let's go into this view. And what we can do is, I'm gonna go into object mode for a second. Let's set this to a reference so we can see it. And let's hide this object as well. And yeah, so now we have our staircase. Yeah, didn't take long at all. All right, so the next thing I'd like to do is make a connector piece for these steps. And to do that, let's go to the poly modeling shelf, add a cylinder into the scene. And I'm gonna move it over here. The first thing we'll wanna do is adjust the number of divisions. So I'll press T on the keyboard, and then I'm gonna lower this to 14 for me. And then I'm going to move it so that it's under the other step. I'll scale it this way so that we can see it intersecting both steps, and then I'll adjust the radius. So first I'll scale it up, and then I'll scale it from the center and move it to here. And I'm probably gonna go with maybe a radius of something like that for me. And let's see here. Right, I'm gonna go with this, and then I'm gonna scale it back down. So something like that works. And let's go into the side view. And in this view, I'm gonna open up the channel box for a second and just make this a template. And I'm going to just go into vertex selection and adjust some of these vertices. So this one, I'm gonna bring down a little bit. And this one, I'll bring up to here, just so that they match. Yeah, that's close enough. So now I'll select both of them, and I'm going to go so that I can see both views. And I wanna just scale this and give it a shorter profile. So for me, I'll probably go with maybe something like that. What I wanna do next is go into face selection, and I wanna grab these top faces. So I'm gonna hold down the tab key. That'll enable drag select. I'm gonna grab all these, and I want to offset that, so let's extrude it. I'm gonna create a little bit of an offset, probably to here is good. And then I want to extrude that up, so I'm gonna press G to repeat, my last command, move this up to about here, and then while those faces are still selected, I'm gonna delete them. There we go. And now let's go into object mode. What I wanna do is, I want to move the pivot to the top. So we're gonna hold down D, then V, click and drag and move it up, and make sure your mouse is hovering around any of those top vertices, and then let go. And now we're ready to mirror this. So to mirror it, we can leave these transforms alone, or we can freeze them. Sometimes it's helpful to freeze these, but we're gonna mirror it in an object space. So what I'm gonna do is hold down Shift. Oh, actually before I do that, there's a mirror button up here if you wanna use it, but I'll use the marking menu. So Shift, right mouse button, and mirror. And what we wanna do is we wanna change it to object over for axis position. We wanna mirror it in the Y axis. And then you can see the arrows pointing up. We wanna mirror it in the positive direction. And there you go. And now let's go into the side view for a second. And I just want to adjust this. So I'm gonna go into vertex selection. Again, I'll turn on to template. And you can see by having these objects on this layer, it makes it very convenient, right? You can also go into wireframe, but wireframe gives you like, a color you might not want for the wireframe. And in here, just gonna move this up to about right here. And I think that feels really pretty good right there. And let's take a look. So now that it's in both of these objects, what I wanna do first is maybe get rid of this edge. So double click this edge, hold down Control, press delete so that I delete those vertices as well. And then let's go into object mode. I want to rename this. So I'm going to call this, let's call this connector. There we go. And then with the connector, I'm going to freeze these transformations, delete that history. And then with the connector, you can see that my pivot is over here. I'm going to hide this layer for a second. I'm going to bring back the grid. We actually want to move our pivot to the center because we want to rotate from that point, because think of it as an arm. We want to rotate this around to match our steps. So, or match that location. So what we'll do is we'll hold down D, then X, hover over that center pivot point and click and drag and move that to the center here and then let go. Right. Now I can bring back this and we can create a mesh network for this. So let's select it, go to your mesh shelf and click on this first icon, which will create our mesh network. And then what we'll do is we will select it. Actually, let's rename it so it's clear what it is. So over here, we'll call this mesh2_connector. And then we want to match the mesh1 distribute numbers over here. So we can see for me, I have 16, 40 for the Y distance, and the rotation is 360. You'll want to match your numbers, right? So down here, what I'm going to do is go 16. For the distance, I need to drag that down to 0. For the Y, we're doing 40. And for the rotation, I'm doing 360. And just like that, boom, we have our staircase with the connector. Let's see here. And then one more thing I'd like to do is later on in the next tutorial, we'll be creating a handrail, and you can join me for that if you like, or if this is good enough for you, that's great. And I'll be making some other things as well. But what I really want is that I want this connector piece to start from here, and I'm gonna make the handrail go up to here. And if I try and move this repro mesh, right, nothing's really gonna happen. I'm just gonna undo that. There is a way to add a transform, move it, but what I'm gonna do is just basically show my connector again, right? And I'm gonna move it over here, and I can center this pivot if I want, right? Doesn't really affect anything, but I can't move it by moving this transform. But what I can do is I can go into vertex selection, grab these vertices, and I can move them this way. And that will move this entire group, and it moves all that over there as well. And then what I can do is maybe go into the side view for a second, and we'll bring back our template, and I can move this down. So with that selected, I can click on this move tool, right, and move this down. And if I want to get closer, get a better view, while that handle's selected, right, I can use my middle mouse button to just move that down further. I'll move it roughly to here, and then let's go into this view, and let's take a look. So I think that looks pretty good like that. Let's see the position. Position's pretty good for me. We could maybe move it here a little bit if we want. And yeah, so now this is positioned for the next tutorial. And the bottom, I would like to change as well, but I'll do that later once we break the instances. So I'll change this one a little bit. But yeah, let's wrap up this tutorial. We're at 23 minutes, got a little longer than I want, but I wanted to cover quite a bit of stuff. I'm gonna just close this up. By the way, you can also close these if you want just by clicking here and making it look a little bit clean, right? So yeah, this is what we have so far. It looks pretty good. For the next tutorial, we'll finish making our staircase. So see you all then.